Okay, so we're live. Now we just gotta wait a moment. But for anyone who's joining us right now, you're watching Stand Up, Fight Back, and that's my dog barking over there. So I apologize. They also want to be on the show, but there's no dogs allowed on this show. So just give it a moment. We'll just wait for a few more people. What'd you say, Carlos?
It's not for right now, but eventually we'll get the dogs on the show.
Yeah, we'll have the dogs join us soon. They're very cute. They're just very bratty. Okay,
They're
so
just trying to raise their voices.
yeah, they like to speak truth to power. Yeah, especially to me. Okay, everyone, hi. So let's get started. So glad everyone could join us this morning, this Sunday morning. So, hi, I'm Margot Pies. I'm a scientist, engineer, and occasional journalist. And this is my co-host over to one side of me. And his name is Carlos Marroquin. He's an amazing grassroots organizer here in California. And you're watching our weekly Sunday show, Stand Up, Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. Oh, excuse me. We simulcast on Facebook and YouTube, so please share us with your friends. Hit a like button, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, all that jazz, and tune in. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Kwazi Nkrumah. Did I pronounce that correctly, Kwazi?
Nkrumah.
Nkrumah, I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Nkrumah.
Nkrumah.
He's the co-chair of the Martin Luther King Coalition of Greater Los Angeles. Thanks to his mother, Kwazi got his start in the civil rights movement in 1962 at the ripe age of 8. He's been a civil and human rights activist since for 59 years. So Carlos, why don't you tell a little bit more about our amazing guest?
Yes, well, good morning, everybody, wherever you may be watching us from. So happy to have you with us here and join us. And today you will meet an amazing organizer, leader for many decades, and a personal friend of mine. I met Kwazi over at the Occupy movement, in which he was one of the point persons that educated a lot of the young activists out there during the Occupy movement. But we have collaborated in many different work, particular housing here in the Southern California area. And is a renowned advocate and activist here in Southern California. And there's much that he offers to the young people, especially the young activists. You know, he's got a lot to share. He's a mentor. He's a good person that out for the benefits of those that voice have been oppressed, marginalized. That's he is a guy that is 100% for the people. So, Kwazi, we want to welcome you.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Margot.
Thank you. So why don't we get started? Sounds like there's a really big event happening later, early this week, tomorrow. So,
yes,
Carlos, Kwazi?
Yes, tomorrow morning, the Martin Luther King Coalition of Greater Los Angeles, along with a good number of other social justice organizations, community organizations, and community residents are going to be conducting a COVID-safe freedom ride, which is going to be a series of caravans through the city, which to commemorate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And his birthday, his official birthday holiday. Generally, at this time of the year, what we have done for a number of years is participated in the Kingdom Day parades, particularly because we wanted to emphasize the political struggles that are going on today that are in the tradition of Dr. King and were his concerns: the struggle against poverty, the struggle against racism and war, and the struggle basically to build new communities out of our communities and a new nation out of this nation. So we are doing this year in the midst of the COVID crisis in order to maintain that tradition, and we hope to launch an alternative type of activity for people to engage in on Dr. King's birthday, which is specifically political in nature.
Yes, Kwazi, so much happening right now across the nation. People are hurting out there. We have chaos upon chaos upon chaos, crises everywhere. The most affected by the crises, the emergencies that the nation are facing are many people of color. Those are the most affected. Those are facts. We are not just saying that because it sound uh, you know pretty or whatever. The fact is that people of color in the United States of America are the most affected crisis hit. And right now, the United States is one of the lowest moments in history with a possible violence taking place in the state capitals in Washington D.C. We don't know what's going to happen, but one thing for sure is that again, people of color are the most affected. This is almost like the right message, the right timing, and everything. And of course, Dr. King's message has endured through generations, and he's pretty much touches uh, the, the the issues that we care about today. His message years ago is the same message that he affects us right now. Is the message that we need to consider right now, and it is the same message that gives hope to the people. Can you tell us a little bit, the situation right now with the Black community at what back in the days of Dr. King? How can we pretty much connect the dots?
Well, I think unfortunately that many of the exact same issues that Dr. King spent his life fighting around are very much on the agenda. They're very much in our faces. They are very much the conditions that surround us today, as you mentioned. Um, First of all, in this COVID crisis, the lack of health access, the lack of safe public facilities, such as the schools, inadequate hospital facilities, and other things, which afflict our communities more than many others, are showing in the massive rate of Black fatalities, brown fatalities, and also Native American fatalities in the face of the COVID virus. So that in itself is a major fact confronting our communities and the people in them. But on top of that, we are facing more police violence and killings in our communities. We have skyrocketing unemployment in our communities. We have a lack of adequate infrastructure and services. And we're also confronting really a major resurgence of racism and racist violence in general in America, which was symbolized by the same mobs that descended on the U.S. Capitol and desecrated it a week and a half ago. All of these things are converging together to create an environment which is reflective of attempts that have been made for some years now to basically reverse and roll back the achievements of Dr. King's civil rights movement, uh, access to services, access to jobs, access to decent housing and communities, and the ability to participate in the political life of this country on the basis of equity. One person, one vote. One of the major factors today that is motivating, should motivate all of us to activate ourselves, is the attempt to push us out of political participation through voter suppression, which is taking many different forms. The Trump administration, in particular, reflected a convergence of these forces and actually an open commitment from some of the highest levels while he has occupied the White House to justify and to legitimize these attacks on civil and human rights. And these struggles have always fallen the hardest on communities of color in this country, not only African Americans, but also the Mexican American communities, immigrant communities of many types, Native Americans, but also, as we saw at the nation's capital, and as we're seeing at state capitals around the country, and in many of the conflicts that are breaking loose due to mob actions around the country today, we're seeing that these attacks are not really limited to people of color. They threaten everyone, and that's part of what Dr. King's message was. He said that a threat to freedom anywhere is a threat to freedom everywhere. And that statement, that thought of Dr. King's is gaining more and more relevance every day as these conditions continue to evolve. But the bottom line is that those of us who are the targets of these rollback efforts, the targets of racial violence, the targets of institutional racism still, and the attempt to reinstate it, must in fact continue to the struggle and take it up on a new basis. We're 50 years down the line since Dr. King was taken away from us. Things have not stood still, and we should not be standing still either. We can't take for granted the fact that some of the laws in this country were changed by the civil rights era and think that the struggle is over. It is not over as long as we are suffering from inequitable conditions of every type. And when we see that there are those who are really committed to dragging us back to a despicable historic past in this country, we have got to struggle today, just as Dr. King struggled in his time, to challenge these realities and change them.
Yeah, so much has happened in the past year with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think that there were some gains that were made there. I see a lot of signs in California that say Black Lives Matter, like on people's houses. I saw recently Black Lives Matter spray painted on a trash can. But at the same time, I see people walking around without a mask on. Like yesterday, I was driving through Venice with my family, and there were so many people not wearing a mask. And these are the same people who are declaring Black Lives Matter. But how can they say Black Lives Matter if they don't wear a mask? Because wearing a mask is caring for Black lives when Black people are disproportionately affected. So I think I'm seeing a disconnect here with this idea of supporting Black lives, protecting Black lives, but then also a carelessness at the same time. And I'm wondering if Dr. Martin Luther King, if you know, from when he was alive, if he saw a similar disconnect, especially amongst white people, because I saw mostly white people not wearing a mask. So, and they seem like, like a liberal person who would support Black people to a certain degree.
Well, Margot, I think that what you're pointing out is very accurate. But the truth is that in spite of the fact that some people are beginning to get it in terms of the significance and importance of taking up the struggle against racism in America, yet and still on the COVID virus front, they have quite a distance to go. And this, on the one hand, we've had Trump and his right-wing supporters who somehow think that they live above and beyond the law, not only the laws of man, but even the laws of nature, and that they don't have to conform to any practices of safety, etc. And often they make the ridiculous assertions that this is a question of their freedom. This is a question of their nonsense. The problem is, though, I mean, you're talking about people who are not necessarily motivated by these right-wing attitudes, but the truth is that in our culture as a whole, there is an attitude that people have that, again, that they somewhat stand above and beyond a lot of the physical and biological threats that are taking place. We see the same attitude about global warming. This is actually the overarching crisis of our planet right now, because if we don't do something about global warming for real, we will not be able to survive on this planet much longer. Yet, people are not really activating to do effective things to get the global warming crisis under control any more than they are really doing things enough to make sure that we are keeping the COVID crisis under control in our communities. This is a problem of our culture. And this is part of why our movements for change must really be very comprehensive. They have to be about changing many of our basic cultural practices. And this is something that Dr. King talked about quite a bit, particularly in his last 3 or 4 years, was the need to really overhaul and change the entire culture that we live in, not only racially, but also economically, ecologically, and in terms of our relations with the rest of the world. So, yes, we have a long way to go in terms of education, and this is one of the reasons why we are stressing very strongly that we want anyone who participates in our car caravan to exercise safe practices, as have been outlined by the Centers for Disease Control and Dr. Fauci. We need to really do this to protect ourselves as well as the people in our communities and in other communities.
Yeah.
Yes. Kwazi, tomorrow, of course, organized about a dozen different organizations came together under the Martin Luther King Coalition, and there's going to be a Ride for Freedom, if you will, about the city of Los Angeles. We're starting over in Skidmore. Tell us the importance of us starting here. Why it's crucial for us to bring attention to that specific part of
But before I answer that, Carlos, let me ask Margot to switch over the sound system again, because the sound system on my phone is faulty and it has not corrected itself. So if you can switch over to my computer sound,
so I
think it'll be better.
Yeah, okay, let me go ahead, because I hear you okay, but I heard Carlos breaking up a little bit. But why don't I do that? Okay, I'll switch you here. Kwazi, can you hear us?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, Carlos. Can you restate your question? Because I wasn't getting it. There was a lot of static.
Yes. Okay. So tomorrow there has been about a dozen organizations together behind the Martin Luther King Coalition. There will be a car caravan to be able to bring attention memory of Dr. King, but also on the issues. Uh, my understanding is that the caravan will be starting from downtown Los Angeles, be over on 6th and Gladys. Tell us why it's so important that specific part of the city to be the start of the caravan. Why that location?
Yeah, and Margot, is it possible to turn on the picture on my phone without the sound? But to answer what you were asking me, Carlos, we have to realize that after Dr. King had met with great success in the civil rights movement, he moved to a whole range of broader issues. The most important of those issues was the question of economic inequality across the board. In the last 2 years of his life, Dr. King dedicated himself to pulling together a broad array of forces from many different communities throughout the United States to tackle the question of economic inequality in our society and the abolition of poverty. He made many statements to the effect of the moral and political and economic aspects of economic inequality, and that these things had to be eliminated in the United States and around the world. So, one of the most stark reflections of the backward motion in American society since Dr. King's time has been the whole phenomena of houselessness and homelessness. I mean, my children grew up watching people living on the street. I didn't have that experience when I was a child. I lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Washington, D.C. at that time, and there was plenty of poverty in America, but you really did not see people actually living on the streets because they had no place to live. And I had to actually teach my children that it was abnormal and wrong that people were in that condition. So, I think in terms of Dr. King's struggle for economic equity, his effort to target poverty at the core of all the social problems of militarism, of racism, of political disenfranchisement. Dr. King understood that poverty and the institutions that create poverty are at the core of the resolution of all of these problems. So it is very important to us, and for our communities today that we pick up where Dr. King was attempting to move forward, which is around these core questions. And obviously, it seems to me that perhaps the most important starting place for that is amongst those who have actually been pushed out of housing and income and jobs and social participation at every level because they are houseless and homeless. So it's very important to us to start at Skid Row, where the homeless problem is in the highest relief in our city, and where also, frankly, we see the intersection of the racial inequality with the economic and political disenfranchisement right there in Skid Row, where if you go through there, you'll see all kinds of people. But in Los Angeles and many other cities, the highest proportion of folks on the street are Black and brown, particularly African American. So, you mentioned before, Carlos, how one reflection of the struggle of the homeless today is the fact that when political groups are even trying to raise the question of poverty and homelessness, much of the media does not want to go down to Skid Row to cover it. And, we have to counteract those tendencies. We have to stand like Dr. King stood and go right to the heart of where the hardest pressed people are concentrated and force their issues into the public conscience. One of the things that was great about Dr. King, one of the most important things about Dr. King, was he brought about a fusion, a wedding between politics and morality. Today, perhaps the greatest crisis that we face is there is almost no morality whatsoever in American politics, and it seems like it is evaporating from our society as a whole. So part of our struggle to carry on Dr. King's tradition is to bring about this this fusion, this wedding, this marriage between morality and politics again, and between morality and economics. This is what Dr. King really represented. It's why he inspired so many people. It's also why so many people who were powerful were deathly afraid of this man who was totally nonviolent, who was committed to loving everybody. There's a song by Nina Simone called "The King of Love Is Dead," which I hope that we're going to play over and over in this car caravan, because it is a gripping song that reflects so well why Dr. King was important and what he really represented and what we are missing in the vacuum of leadership today. And so all of these things come together in our efforts to raise up the questions of poverty, the questions of environment and global warming, the questions of fighting back against the COVID crisis. And fighting back means a lot more than just wearing face masks. Fighting back against COVID means fighting to have the monies redirected from military budgets and the support of corporate interests and glorification and enrichment, and having those resources directed toward health care. In particular, we should be fighting for single payer health care policies in the United States that would guarantee that every person automatically has access to the very best healthcare available as their human right, whoever they are, whatever community they come from, whatever language they speak, or anything else. You see, and anything short of that is not acceptable. And that is part of what we are saying through our presence today, even in the midst of this COVID virus. Our advocacy is not going to stop because conditions are hazardous, but we're not going to be stupid about it either. We are telling people, that being careful, exercising self-care and community care is at the essence of the struggle. This struggle is, in fact, about preserving and advancing and improving our lives. It is not about being stupid. It is not about parading around as if ignoring safe practices is some form of freedom. That is simply a form of license and social irresponsibility, and that is immoral. And so all of these things come together. And the beauty of this, Carlos, you and I know from our own experiences over the years, there are people in every community in this country who follow Dr. King's advice, which was that the time is always right to do what is right.
Exactly.
And that is what we are going to do. And, frankly, I have told a number of people, I don't give a damn whether the rowdy boys or Trump's followers are out there trying to be threatening or what. I don't give a damn about that. If Dr. King was stopped by that kind of motion and those kinds of forces, we wouldn't be acknowledging him today, and we wouldn't have any civil rights to defend, because he was doing this in the most dangerous corners of the United States,
Mississippi, Louisiana, Southwest Georgia, Alabama, Texas, lynch law states where if a person of color in the slightest degree stood up for their social rights as a human being, they were automatically putting their life on the line. And the kind of violence which was unleashed against us in that environment is almost indescribable. No one who is unfamiliar with the practices tied to lynching can really understand what it meant for people to stand up in places like Mississippi and the associated states, which is the hardcore belt of support for Donald Trump and all of these right-wing movements in America today, and has been for years. It is the solid base of political reaction in America. And you look at it and you just have to shake your head, because these very same people who are committing themselves to mobilizing against your rights and mine and equal rights for all are themselves some of the first people to suffer the negative impact of all of these types of policies and of that entire mentality. So, we're not closing the door to anybody. I mean, yes, we are concerned about our community, but we are also concerned about everybody else's community, because the reality, as Dr. King pointed out, is that this is the interrelated connection of reality today. What affects you affects me, and what affects me affects you. And it's just like, when you have cancer, it might be concentrated in your lungs, it might be concentrated in your intestines, but guess what? It means that your body has cancer. All of you is threatened by that cancer, and the longer that cancer is there, the more the existence of your total body organism is threatened. And just as it with individual human beings, so with a society.
Yes, Kwazi. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. I just want to take a quick moment and remind everybody who's watching that if you're just tuning in, you're watching Stand Up, Fight Back, and Carlos and I are the hosts, and we have our guest, Kwazi. And somebody just asked a moment ago about the event that's happening. So Carlos, can you remind our viewers about what this event is, where it's going to be, the time?
Yes, tomorrow morning here in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, at the corner of 6th Street and Gladys, there will be a car caravan for two reasons. One will be to give honor and memory to Dr. King here in Los Angeles. And second will be to highlight the issues that he fought for, and we continue to fight to this day. So that will be a very, very important caravan. It will be a social distance, if you will. And perhaps Kwazi can explain us a little bit of some of the things that are being recommended. For example, no more than 2 people in a car, and etc. But it will be tomorrow. And Kwazi, my understanding starts at 10 o'clock in the morning, correct?
Yes, we'll be gathering at 6th and Gladys at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. We will be there for at least an hour or so, because we want to give people time to decorate their cars. We want to kind of organize the caravans, because actually there are going to be 2 caravans, one of which is focused primarily on the struggles of the houseless and the homeless in our communities. The other one, which is a broad general focus on the full range of political issues of the day, and that the one caravan from LA, sponsored by LA Can, which we are in unity with, they're in unity with ours. We're going to leave together from LA Can's headquarters at 6th and Gladys at about 11 to 11:15 tomorrow morning. We will travel together for several stops where they will be particularly outreaching to the homeless in the downtown LA area. Then they are going to split off and head toward Hollywood, where there's a huge struggle about access to vacant hotels for homeless people and housing vouchers and other issues. We will be heading south from a common point, which will be MacArthur Park, and we will be going past USC, University of Southern California, where there is an issue about the funding of campus police that students are trying to get revised, and we want to support that. And then we'll be going down Martin Luther King Avenue and over to Leimert Park, where we will wrap up. And we are looking again at the full range of issues that Dr. King stood for and that are on the agenda of today: unemployment, housing, access to health care, the global climate crisis, getting corrupt politicians, whether they are president of the United States or dog catcher, if they are violating human rights, if they are violating people's civil rights. We want them not only impeached, we want them to be indicted, convicted, and jailed. Just like poor people are put in jail for minor violations of the law, these are super criminals, and they should pay the full price. Even some of us who believe in prisons think these folks need to go to jail. So we're addressing all those issues and more, and the question of redirecting resources from war to human needs. And we urge anyone and everyone in the community who wants to join us to come on out and join our car caravans. And you are more than welcome, whoever you are.
Great.
Right. Yes, we are.
Carlos,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh no, you go right ahead.
Yeah, we're expecting upwards of 200 cars, perhaps even more. We did held a press conference on Friday, which was attended by all the major networks here in Southern California. So we are expecting a lot of cars out there. So come early. 10 o'clock is the assembly time, but you come earlier if you want to decorate your car. There's going to be people out there since 8 o'clock in the morning to help you decorate your car and put signs reflecting Dr. King's message. It's going to be beautiful. Every year, the Martin Luther King Coalition marches through the parade route over here on Martin Luther King Boulevard, except for this year, of course, because of COVID-19. So come out, bring your mask. You know, we're going to be riding. It's going to be a good time because we're going to be able to share the things, the struggles that people are dealing with, and the Dr. King's message, a message of hope.
Kwazi, I want to bring you back to talk a little bit more about the unhoused or the homeless community. You touched on something that I think is really important and that maybe people are not aware of, or it's just kind of happened in a way in the background that perhaps a lot of people have not made this connection about the shift from when people were living in poverty, but they were still housed, to now where we have people in poverty and unhoused. Can you talk a little bit about when this started to happen? What were there certain policies that came in place or that went out of law that allowed this to happen in this country?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the conditions for homelessness were created in the 1970s. They were created in the 1970s because of the beginning of a whole trend of cutbacks on social services, cutbacks on subsidies for low and moderate income housing throughout the United States. This became national policy. It became policy in the various states. And so the resources started being cut off that could have prevented or preempted the development of homelessness. That happened in the 1970s. it really took off much further in the 1980s, particularly when Reagan took office, because Reagan took office on a platform of a very vindictive, negative, and socially backward um, approach to economics, politics, and social equality. That was also the time, and I think we have to show the connection between these different phenomena. Homelessness in America began to snowball at the same time that the prison industrial complex began to snowball and mushroom way out of proportion, and began to swallow up huge chunks of social resources that previously would have gone to social programs. And again, so you know there are three elements right there together: social programs being squeezed to death, prisons being expanded, and people unable to find housing and homelessness. And of course, that was all developing at the same time that Reagan created the economic conditions through a engineered recession that actually created the rust, what they call the Rust Belt in America. It destroyed basic industries throughout this country and resulted in the flight of many of the basic manufacturing industries in the United States to third world countries where workers have no rights and where their wages and income are kept to an absolute minimum, often through dictatorial governments that work on behalf of corporate interests, not even their own people. So all of these things began to pick up speed in the 1970s, began to really become a major phenomena of consequence in the 80s, and they have continued ever since. And frankly, again, this is a reflection of economic decay of the United States and its social system. It is a reflection of moral decay of this country, and it is a reflection of political decay. And this decay, as I said, has been going on now for decades, on and on and on. And Carlos and I met when the Occupy movement popped up some years back. And the thing that was important about Occupy, it had many weaknesses, but its great strength was that, particularly, here were many young people, the new generation, who decided that all of this decay not only was out of control, but that something needed to be said and done about it. And so they began to redirect a lot of the national dialogue on all of these questions. That is where the Bernie Sanders campaign actually was spawned. That is where many of the new movements that are in the field today around housing, around homelessness, around political disenfranchisement, all of these things are related, as Dr. King always taught us. And of course, they are developing or declining side by side. And that is why we have a broad range of issues that we're addressing with this car caravan effort that we're calling the Freedom Rides. These are Freedom Rides, and we invite everybody to get on this freedom train with us, because the truth of the matter is that, there's no conductor or engineer on this train other than ourselves. You see? And if nothing is happening on our behalf, perhaps that's because we collectively, in our communities, in our workplaces, in the political arena, we are not doing enough to make these problems disappear and to make sure that people are accountable for addressing them. And so a lot of the moral decay, which is reflected in political and economic decay, is really our collective responsibility to address it. I mean, every single person who is an inhabitant of this country.
Yes,
you see,
Kwazi.
we have a collective responsibility to do this. And if we don't, no one else will.
Absolutely. And I think you're going in a very good direction, which I think is, now we're talking a little bit about strategy for people to get involved and to take action. And so here we are, and we are in 2021, and we are still in the midst of a pandemic. We're finding new ways to organize digitally with these. You have a caravan going on. What is your strategy for change this year? And Joe Biden will be inaugurated next week on Wednesday, most likely. I think it's a high probability. So what do you think? We're going to have Democrats in both houses in charge. What is the strategy going forward? Because as we've discussed, this is a very difficult time. A lot of people are losing their jobs. The unemployment is up again. There's like millions of jobs that need to be created in order for us to get back to where we were just a year ago. What's your strategy to try to make things more just and really better for the majority of people in this country?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're trying to engage in activities that broad numbers of people from the community can join if they wish to, if they recognize the nature of the crisis we're in, and if they recognize their own responsibility to stand up and stand against these trends, then we can perhaps do something to change things. Until more people get off of their behinds, off of the couch, out from behind their computers, and begin to put their feet on the ground where they are, to change the conditions around them, and to link hands with other people of goodwill throughout our society, no matter who they are. You see, because it shouldn't be limited by what a person's color is, or what how much they pull in their weekly check, or any of that other stuff, or even where they're located physically. It has to be based on what are our objectives in terms of the kind of society we want to live in. You see, and this is what, frankly, this is the essence of what was so positive about Dr. King's message. He was very well rooted where he was. He was ministers of various churches. The civil rights movement, to begin with, was generated within the African American community. But from the beginning, Dr. King extended a hand to all people of goodwill to unite to move these rocks. So that's the first thing. And I would say the first thing is, folks who haven't done anything yet need to get in their car and come out to this caravan on Monday morning, on Dr. King's birthday. And maybe if it's the first thing they've ever done, good for them. That would be a first step. Come and ride in your car safely according to the guidelines developed by Dr. Fauci and the CDC, which is you should only have two people in your car, the driver and one person in the passenger seat in the back on the far side from the driver. This is a safety measure to prevent us from sharing germs we don't want to share these days. Also, to keep your windows cracked, to make sure that there's plenty of ventilation going through the car as you are in our caravan and parade. And finally, not to, if you have an air conditioning system, don't flip the button that closes off the air and simply recycles it back into the car, because that means if there are any germs in your car, they are coming back at you constantly. So these are just three measures, but they're just certain and basic. And again, to wear a mask. These things make it safe for us to stand up together in these difficult times. And our sense of it is, and in our discussions among all the groups that have been working on action, is that all of them have plans for many other actions through the spring and summer. Yes, Joe Biden is coming to office, and he's a different political animal from Donald Trump and the people who support him. Yes, there are plenty of Democrats. Well, there are more Democrats in the Senate and in Congress at the moment. But the truth is that unless we, the people, create conditions where we are raising our own demands in defense of ourselves, our communities, and our lives. We cannot count on any of these politicians to automatically take care of business. They are subject to many different pressures. And one of the big pressures on Joe Biden, nice guy that he is he's still dealing with a very close national election. And all of these right-wing minded, backward, racist-minded people, these people who have vindictive attitudes toward the poor or people who don't have money, and he's going to be under a lot of pressure to work with them to get things done. That means we have to build a much stronger base of support in our community for our needs, and we have to stay mobilized so that the politicians see that they've got to pay attention to what our demands are. You see, and that is actually how the game is played. So it's really important. Most of us are not politically sophisticated. We're just trying to make it through the day and through the week and live. We don't know about all these political maneuvers and blah, blah, blah. But the truth of the matter is we have to learn something about it, and we have to, put our presence in the mix. So, we are hoping, because we have a range of groups that are working on many essential problems of today, working together on this caravan, that we collectively will both have a stronger base of experience of having a safe action that people can participate in the midst of this COVID stuff without being subjected to hazards. And that number two, that hopefully we will build the kind of solidarity among all of these groups and many others that will allow us, as we go through the upcoming seasons, to not only hold actions and let these groups continue to do their work, but that we build solidarity and support of all those actions which benefit our communities and which benefit our country in the true sense of the word. So, those are our strategies, and that's our basic move. And I think that these car caravans, for the time being, are going to be a very essential tool for those who are advocating for themselves, for their communities, and for each other. I think that they can allow us to make our presence felt and our issues heard, even in the midst of this COVID virus. And that is part of what we're trying to communicate to people.
Yes. Kwazi, a question for you. What gives you hope? What gives you hope, Kwazi?
I guess the two things that give me the most hope, Carlos, are number one, when I look backward, I was 8 years old when my mother pulled me into the civil rights movement. I was tremendously inspired by Dr. King and all of the civil rights activists. I mean, particularly for myself and other people who were students and young people. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was an incredibly inspiring organization and movement that moved me to continue to involve myself in the struggle for change and for justice. I am tremendously inspired by all those in the past who committed themselves to changing conditions for people who were not living decently, who were not being treated with equity, and often at the sacrifice of their lives. So, there are people from the past who inspire me who give me hope, because I can see that they made progress in conditions even worse than the ones that we're in today. On the other hand, looking forward and looking around us, I have to say it is always the young people who inspire me. When I see that young people are stepping up and taking responsibility to tackle the grievous problems of our times, for me, that is incredibly inspiring. And personally, at my age, my main thing today is I simply want to help them to become problem solvers who are effective, who make a difference, who don't burn themselves out chasing approaches that won't work, but who learn how to actually do things effectively and make progress from it. Um, I learned from the people who came ahead of me, and frankly, Carlos, I've had a very successful organizing career for the past 59 years. Uh, every arena I've been involved in, I can say something concrete came out of it for the people who I was struggling with and for. And so that has kept me going, frankly, because I think people get very discouraged when they don't make any headway. But I was able to learn from the people who came before me, and that was what made me much more effective. So, I just think that we have many fine young people today who are becoming morally and politically responsible. And they are doing what two generations ahead of them have failed to do. They are beginning to put their feet on the ground and say, you know what? Um, this stuff has gone too far. This stuff has got to be dealt with. And I'm not just complaining, I'm going to dedicate myself to make sure that that happens. When people reach that point, that's when you know that things are, in fact, going to change. So I am very optimistic because I see that all over the place with a whole slew of young people who a few years ago, they were nowhere to be seen. In fact, maybe they were too young to even participate in things, but they're not today. And, they're stepping up. So that gives me that the past and the future both give me great hope. And, we don't always win our fights, but I'm kind of a win, lose, or draw person myself. I think we have to struggle to make things better and not assume that we're going to win, not assume we're going to lose. Win, lose, or draw. We have to make our decision and commit ourselves to make a better world for ourselves. And once we collectively have seriously done that, that is when things will change.
Thank you, Kwazi. Well, we're coming up on the hour now, so I think that was such a great thing that we just heard Kwazi say about those inspiring. I feel like this is just like the right moment to end this. Carlos, what do you think? Do you want to ask another question of Kwazi?
No, I'm really content and happy that Kwasi was able to join us. As you heard him, and if you came in late, go back. This is going to be archived, and hear those important message that Kwasi has, because the struggle is real. The issues that affect our communities is very real, and people are in great danger day in and day out. But today we can say that with the message of Dr. King that has inspired us through the years, it is the same message that should inspire us today to move forward. And the only way that we can do that is when we are all in together. And this is why this Martin Luther King Coalition is very important and dear to my heart, because I've seen the kind of work that these organizations have done throughout the years and how they have come together, putting the differences to the side and moving forward to highlight the issues that are affecting millions of people. So, Kwasi, I want to say thank you so much, brother, because you have always been one of my heroes, one of my mentors, if you will, and you have always seen me eye to eye. You never look down at people. That's a quality of a leader, of a real leader. You have always encouraged people to participate, to get involved. You have always lifted the youth and put them at the forefront. It is crucial and important to have them at the front because this is their world. And so I want to say thank you, Kwasi. And I'm looking forward in being at Caravan tomorrow at 10 o'clock at the corner of Gladys and 6th Street in downtown Los Angeles.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Margot. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And again, Carlos, you also inspire me, brother, because you're truly committed. You're one of those people who made a decision, moral and political, and you've been very, very consistent. So it's always a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you both. And thank you everyone who's watching. Remember that Dr. King's message is extremely important today, more than ever, especially amidst a lot of the violence that we're seeing. Dr. King's message was love for everybody, and nonviolence. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward. And thank you for joining us. You've been watching Stand Up, Fight Back. I'm your co-host, Margot Pies, and over on this side, that side, that's Carlos Marroquin. He's an amazing grassroots organizer here in Los Angeles. And we air every Sunday at 10 a.m. and sometimes at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And don't forget that this event is happening here in Los Angeles tomorrow. It starts at 10 a.m. and people are meeting at 6th and Gladys. So we hope to see you there. Have a wonderful Sunday. Stay safe, stay healthy, and please wear a mask. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.